Emily Harper noticed the moment because it felt like a quiet shift inside her, the kind that happens without warning, the kind that does not ask for permission, and it began on an ordinary morning inside a shared workspace in downtown Portland where people came and went without looking at each other for too long, where coffee cups steamed and keyboards clicked, and where Emily usually felt safe because everything followed a pattern she understood, but that morning her routine broke when her hand slipped and dark coffee spread across the page of her sketchbook, ruining a design she had worked on for days, and the frustration rose quickly in her chest because she hated mistakes, she hated mess, and she hated feeling unprepared, and as she stood frozen, embarrassed and annoyed with herself, a quiet voice beside her said, "Here," and a stranger handed her napkins without rushing her or making a joke, and when she looked up she saw Daniel Brooks for the first time properly, not just as another person sharing the room but as someone real, standing there with calm eyes and a gentle expression that made her breathe a little slower, and she expected small talk or an apology for interrupting her space, but instead he smiled softly and said, "Some days don't go as planned," and then, almost like an afterthought, "Just go with the flow," and the words were simple, nothing clever, nothing dramatic, yet they landed somewhere deep because Emily had spent years doing the opposite. Holding tightly to plans, schedules, and careful choices after leaving Ohio for a life she hoped would feel braver, and she thanked him, watched him return to his desk by the window, and tried to focus again, but her mind kept replaying the moment, the calm way he spoke, the fact that he did not seem rushed or distracted, and as the day moved forward, she found herself noticing small details she usually ignored, like how Daniel paused before speaking, how he looked outside often as if checking in with the world rather than escaping it, and how his presence felt steady without demanding attention, and that unsettled her because she was used to people who filled silence, people who wanted something, people who needed to be seen, and Daniel seemed different, like someone who trusted time to do its work, and later, when they crossed paths near the coffee machine, they exchanged a few polite words about deadlines and weather, nothing meaningful, yet Emily felt the same strange pull, the sense that something had begun without asking her opinion, and when she finally left the building that evening, the city felt louder than usual, her thoughts crowded, and she realized she was carrying those 4 words with her, turning them over as she walked home, wondering why they felt like a challenge rather than advice, because Emily had built her life by controlling every step, believing that letting go meant losing balance, and now, after one brief interaction with a man who knew nothing about her past, her fears, or her careful rules, she felt a quiet question forming inside her, a question about what might happen if she stopped gripping life so tightly, and as she unlocked her apartment door, she told herself it was nothing, just a passing moment, just a stranger with kind manners, but even as she said it, she knew that something had shifted, that the flow he spoke of had already begun to move through her carefully planned world, whether she was ready or not. The days after that first moment moved faster than Emily expected, as if life had quietly shifted gears without telling her, and soon short conversations with Daniel became part of her routine, not planned, not forced, but natural, happening in hallways, near the printer, or during quick coffee breaks where time seemed to stretch just enough to matter, and they spoke about ordinary things like projects, music playing softly in the background, the way rain made the city feel slower, yet beneath those simple words there was a growing sense of comfort that surprised Emily because she was careful with people and usually kept emotional distance, but Daniel never pushed, never asked questions that felt too close, and that made her open up without realizing it, sharing small pieces of herself like how she moved to Portland to feel less afraid of change or how quiet mornings helped her think, and Daniel listened in a way that made her feel heard without being examined, nodding gently, smiling when her words drifted, and sometimes adding his own stories about growing up near the water in Vancouver. About long walks and fresh starts, about how leaving a place did not always mean forgetting it, and Emily found herself looking forward to those moments more than she wanted to admit, noticing how his presence slowed her racing thoughts, how silence between them never felt heavy but full, and one evening after work they walked together without planning to, stepping into the cool air as the sky faded into soft colors, their steps matching naturally, and Emily felt an urge to say something important, something honest, but fear rose again, reminding her of past heartbreaks and unfinished endings, so she asked safe questions instead, and Daniel answered calmly, explaining that he came to Portland because he needed space to breathe, because sometimes staying still hurt more than moving on, and his words struck a familiar chord inside her, making her realize how similar their reasons were even if their lives looked different. And as they stopped near her street, the moment stretched, filled with things left unsaid, and Emily felt the pull of possibility mixed with the weight of caution, wondering if allowing herself to feel something again was brave or foolish, and Daniel simply wished her good night, his voice steady, his eyes warm, and walked away without turning back, leaving Emily standing there with a quiet ache she could not name. And that night she lay awake replaying every small interaction, every look, every pause, realizing that what unsettled her was not attraction alone but the slow realization that she was letting someone matter, that Daniel's calm presence had slipped past her defenses, and though nothing had happened in a clear or dramatic way, Emily understood that something important was unfolding, something gentle yet powerful, and the uncertainty of where it might lead both frightened and thrilled her, because for the first time in a long while, she felt connected without control, and that feeling lingered, steady and unresolved, as the days continued to move forward. The change did not arrive suddenly but crept in quietly, almost politely, and Emily felt it before she could explain it, noticing that Daniel began leaving the workspace earlier than usual, that their shared moments grew shorter, that his smile stayed kind but his eyes no longer rested easily, and at first she told herself she was imagining it, that people had busy weeks, that nothing between them had ever been promised, yet the space felt real and uncomfortable. And one afternoon when the room was nearly empty and rain tapped softly against the windows, Emily finally gathered the courage to ask if he was okay, her voice calm even though her chest felt tight, and Daniel paused longer than usual before answering, as if choosing which truth to share, and then he told her he had received a job offer back in Vancouver, a strong offer, one that made sense, one that carried weight. And Emily felt the words land heavily even as she forced a supportive smile, and told him that it sounded like a good opportunity, because she did not want to be the person who stood in the way of someone's future. But inside her something sank, realizing that what had felt steady and growing was suddenly fragile, and Daniel explained that he had come to Portland to escape noise in his life, to step away from expectations, and now the past was gently calling him back, not with force but with responsibility. And Emily listened carefully, hearing the conflict in his voice, understanding more than she wanted to admit because she too had once left a place believing distance would solve everything. And as they stood there surrounded by familiar desks and muted sounds, she became aware of how much she had grown attached to the quiet presence he brought into her days, how his calm had made her mornings softer and her thoughts clearer, and the idea of losing that connection felt like losing something unfinished, something she had not yet found the words to protect. Yet she stayed silent because fear told her not to reach, not to reveal how much he mattered. And later that evening, she walked home alone under gray skies, replaying their conversation with every step, realizing that she had been opening her heart slowly without naming it, trusting the comfort without demanding clarity, and now the uncertainty felt sharper because it might end without ever being acknowledged. And she wondered if she had mistaken kindness for something more or if she had simply been too careful again, and the thought followed her through dinner, through the quiet of her apartment, through the long hours of night where sleep refused to come, and memories of small moments surfaced, shared smiles, thoughtful pauses, walks without direction, and she saw clearly that Daniel had become part of her emotional landscape, not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. And the hardest part was knowing that nothing bad had happened, that no one was at fault, that life was simply moving again in a direction she could not control, and the realization hurt because it reminded her why she had built walls in the first place. Yet even in that ache there was growth, because she understood that caring, even briefly, even quietly, was not a mistake. And when she finally drifted into sleep as the rain continued outside, Emily knew that whatever happened next would change her, because something honest had already begun, and endings, even soft ones, always leave marks. Daniel's last day arrived without ceremony, yet everything felt heavier, as if the space itself knew something was ending, and Emily noticed how every sound seemed sharper, every moment more fragile, and she found him standing by the window where light always softened his face, and for a brief second neither of them spoke because words felt too small for what had grown quietly between them. And then Emily said she wanted to say goodbye, her voice steady even though her heart was racing, and Daniel smiled with relief, admitting he had hoped she would come, and they stepped outside together into moving city air where cars passed and people hurried by, unaware of the quiet turning point unfolding, and Emily realized she did not want to leave things unfinished, did not want to repeat the old habit of silence that had followed her for years, so she spoke honestly, saying she had always believed control was safety, that planning every step had felt necessary, but that knowing him had changed how she saw things, had shown her that calm could exist without certainty. And Daniel listened closely, his expression open, and he told her that meeting her had made his time in Portland feel meaningful, that her thoughtful nature and quiet strength had grounded him when he needed it most, and though neither of them promised anything dramatic or made bold plans, the truth they shared felt powerful because it was real, and as they stood there, Emily understood that courage did not always mean holding on, sometimes it meant allowing life to move forward honestly, and Daniel said he did not know what the future would look like, only that he was grateful their paths had crossed, and Emily felt a calm settle inside her, not the sadness she expected, but acceptance mixed with hope, because she had finally spoken from the heart instead of hiding behind fear, and when they said goodbye, it was gentle and respectful, filled with warmth rather than regret, and as Daniel walked away, Emily watched him until he disappeared into the crowd, feeling a quiet strength rise within her, knowing that even if this connection did not continue in the way she once imagined, it had changed her in a lasting way, and as she walked home alone under an open sky, she realized that life did not need clear answers to move forward, that growth often came from moments that were brief but honest, and for the first time in a long while, she felt ready to trust the unknown, ready to let life unfold without gripping it too tightly, carrying with her the soft lesson Daniel had offered from the beginning, that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is simply go with the flow.